The dress shop parking lot felt like an oven. Heat waves danced off black asphalt while I stood there with pins still stuck in my sleeves. The seamstress had just finished marking my mother of the bride dress when my phone buzzed. "You're uninvited from the wedding. Please respect our wishes." The message came from Isla, my daughter. I read it 3 times before it sank in. My hands started shaking as I stared at those cold blue words. The seamstress asked if I was paying the rush fee today, but I couldn't speak. I pressed call. Straight to voicemail after 1 ring. The sun burned my face as I stood frozen. Cars drove past like nothing had changed, but everything had changed. After 8 months of paying for flowers, venues, and dresses, my own daughter had just kicked me out with a text message. I walked to my car on unsteady legs. Inside my purse was a thick folder full of receipts and contracts. Every single one had my name on it. Every payment came from my bank account. One thought kept spinning. If I wasn't invited, why was I still paying for it? My name is Susan March. I'm 68, and I just got uninvited to my daughter's wedding by text. The AC in my car blew stale perfume from last week's bridal fitting while I tried to stop shaking. I opened the folder of wedding contracts. Every page showed the same thing. Susan March as primary payer. Venue deposit, catering down payment, photographer's retainer. Even the engagement party I wasn't allowed to help plan had been charged to my credit card. $83,000 so far, with another $40,000 due before the wedding day. All for a celebration I was now banned from attending. I called my bank from the parking lot. The customer service rep put me on hold while elevator music played. Through the dress shop window, I could see other mothers helping daughters try on gowns. Their faces were bright with joy. Mine felt like stone. When the rep returned, I spoke clearly. "I need to cancel all scheduled transfers related to the Isla March wedding account. Remove my credit card as backup payment for any vendors. Can you tell me the reason for these changes?" I looked at the text again. I'm no longer attending the event. My dining room table was covered with wedding contracts when the sun started setting. I'd been sitting there for 2 hours going through every piece of paper. The banker had found something troubling during our call. "Mrs. March, you're listed as guarantor on a bridal bridge loan. Did you sign paperwork for that? I'd never heard of any bridge loan. Send me that document right now. And please record this call." The contract arrived 20 minutes later. My signature was on the guarantor line, but something looked wrong. The handwriting was close to mine, but not quite right. The date was from last month, when I'd been visiting my sister in Florida. I called my neighbor, Mrs. Ortiz. She used to be a paralegal before retiring. When she saw the document, her face went hard. "Susan, this signature is forged. You need to report this immediately." I stared at the fake signature while my stomach turned. Someone had been using my name to borrow money for the wedding. Someone had been counting on me to pay for everything while planning to cut me out. The worst part wasn't the money. It was realizing my own daughter might have known about this. The printer hummed as it spit out page after page. I was writing the same message to every wedding vendor, and I wanted each one to have a proper paper copy along with the email. "To whom it may concern, all funds previously pledged by Susan March for the Isla March wedding are hereby rescinded, effective immediately. This action is taken due to my removal from the guest list and discovery of unauthorized financial commitments made in my name." I attached proof of every payment, screenshots of the uninvite text, the forged loan document with a note about the police report I was filing. Mrs. Ortiz read over my shoulder. "This is perfect, Susan. Clear, professional, and documented. They can't say you didn't warn them." 27 vendors got the email. Florist, caterer, venue manager, photographer, band, transportation company. Even the woman making wedding favors. I printed copies for my files and hit send on all of them at once. My computer made a swooshing sound as they flew into cyberspace. Then I sat back and waited for my phone to start ringing. The first call came 18 minutes later. It was the wedding planner, and she sounded like she was having trouble breathing. The grocery store checkout line moved slowly while I stood holding roses I'd planned to bring to the rehearsal dinner. A neighbor appeared beside me with her cart full of diet soda and frozen dinners. "Oh, Susan, I heard you're not going to Isla's wedding. She told my daughter it's better for optics. My stomach dropped. Optics? You know, keeping the guest list young and fresh. Modern weddings are all about the photos now. She grabbed a candy bar. Maura said it would be awkward having parents from different generations in pictures. Maura, the groom's mother with her sweet voice and sharp eyes. I'd met her exactly 3 times, and each time she'd made little comments about my clothes, my car, my house, always with a smile, always like she was trying to help. Now I understood what had really happened. Maura had convinced my daughter that I was an embarrassment, that a 68-year-old woman would somehow ruin the perfect wedding photos. I put the roses back and walked to customer service. I need stamps, a lot of stamps. If they wanted to play games with family loyalty, I could play games with wedding planning. My kitchen kettle screamed while I dug through the old cookie tin where I kept small memories. Inside were appointment cards from every wedding vendor, receipts for deposits, even the napkin where Ela had first sketched her dress idea. Each piece of paper told the same story. Susan March, paying for everything. Susan March, making it possible. Susan March, being told to wait in the car during venue visits so the young people could talk. I remembered the cake tasting where Isla said I couldn't come inside because there wasn't enough room. I'd sat in the parking lot for 2 hours, then Venmo'd the baker $800 for a cake I never got to try. I remembered the florist appointment where I was asked to wait outside because my traditional taste might influence Ela's vision. Then I paid $4,000 for flowers I'd never seen. Every receipt was a love letter nobody had bothered to read. Every payment was me trying to be part of something I was already being pushed out of. I laid the uninvited text on top of the pile, like a flag of surrender. Then I flipped it over and wrote today's date in red pen. Rain ticked against my living room windows while I sat in my favorite chair with tea. My phone rang at exactly 7 o'clock. The wedding planner sounded panicked. Susan, we have a serious problem. The venue flagged the account because your final payment didn't go through. We're only 7 days out. I kept my voice soft and calm. That's right. The payment was canceled because I'm no longer invited to the wedding. But you're the primary account holder. Without your payment, we can't guarantee the booking. Then I guess Isla and Jesse need to figure out their own payment plan. Long silence. I could hear papers shuffling and keyboard clicking. Susan, please, can we talk about this? Maybe there was a misunderstanding? There was no misunderstanding. My daughter sent me a text message uninviting me from her wedding. The message was very clear. But the contracts were signed when I was invited. Now I'm not invited. It's really that simple. More silence. Then, this is going to be a disaster. I sipped my tea and watched raindrops race down the window. That's unfortunate. I hope they figure something out. After hanging up, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. The bank branch smelled like new carpet and paper. I sat across from the manager while she pulled up my accounts. The pen on a chain felt cold as I signed forms, revoking my guarantor status on the bridge loan. Mrs. March, I have to show you something concerning. She turned her monitor toward me. This guarantor signature doesn't match other signatures we have on file. The fake signature looked like mine from far away, but up close the differences were obvious. My real signature had a specific loop in the M that this one was missing. The fake one pressed too hard, like someone was tracing. I've never seen this document before today. I was in Florida when this was supposedly signed. Her face got serious. This appears to be forgery, Mrs. March. I'm going to freeze this loan immediately and flag it for fraud investigation. She printed copies and put them in a manila envelope. You should file a police report. Someone used your identity to secure a $30,000 loan. Walking back to my car, I felt anger building in my chest. It was one thing to uninvite me from the wedding. It was another thing entirely to steal my identity to pay for it. I drove straight to the police station. Moths circled my porch light while I sat on the swing with my phone. It was past 9 when Ela finally called me back. I'd been expecting this conversation all day. Mom, what did you do? Her voice was tight and rehearsed, like she'd been practicing. I canceled the payments for a wedding I'm not invited to. It seemed logical. You're being spiteful. Maura had to cover the shortfall with her own credit cards. Maura, the same Maura who convinced you that having me at your wedding would be bad for optics? Silence. Then, it's not about that. Then what is it about, Isla? Help me understand why I became such an embarrassment that my own daughter had to fire me by text message. You're being dramatic. We just thought, who is we? You and Jessie, you and Maura, because last time I checked I was your mother, not them. Don't make this harder than it has to be. I stood up from the porch swing. I'm not making anything hard. I got uninvited from your wedding, so I stopped paying for your wedding. Cause and effect. Mom, when you're ready to talk to me like I'm your mother instead of your wallet, call me back. I hung up before she could respond. The wedding venue office smelled like lemon cleaner and fresh flowers. I sat in the back row while the manager went over the new contract with Jesse and his mother, Maura. Without my package deal, everything had changed. The pricing structure is different now, the manager explained. All discounts tied to Mrs. March's early payments are no longer valid. I watched Maura's face tighten as she looked at the numbers. The venue cost had jumped by $12,000. The upgraded linens were gone. The premium bar package was replaced with basic beer and wine. This is ridiculous, Maura said, but her voice wasn't as confident as usual. We had an agreement. The agreement was with Mrs. March as the primary client. Since she's no longer participating, we have to restructure everything. Jesse looked like he wanted to disappear into his chair. He kept glancing back at me with confused, angry eyes. I gave him a small wave. Maura signed the new contract with a shaky hand. As she wrote her name, I quietly took a photo of the page with my phone. The new total was $58,000, due in full before the ceremony. When they finished, the manager walked over to me. Mrs. March, I'm sorry about how this worked out. Don't be sorry. Sometimes people show you who they really are. The bridal shop smelled like chalk and silk. The seamstress looked nervous as she led me to the back room where my mother of the bride dress hung on a hook. She'd called that morning, asking if I was still coming to the final fitting. Mrs. March, I need to tell you something, she said quietly. Your daughter was here yesterday. She wanted to change the dress you ordered. Change it how? She said your taste was too old-fashioned and that Maura thought the style would look dated in photos. The seamstress twisted her hands. She ordered a completely different dress in your size, but she said you hadn't paid anything toward the wedding. I pulled out my receipt from the first fitting. $800, paid in cash, with my signature at the bottom. The seamstress looked at it and winced. I remember now. You paid right here at this counter. She shook her head. I'm sorry, Mrs. March. I knew that didn't sound right. Keep your receipts safe, I told her. And don't make any more changes to any dress unless the person paying for it approves them first. I left the original dress hanging there. If Isla wanted a different style, she could pay for it herself. The real estate office lobby smelled like new carpet and coffee. I'd gotten a strange call from a mortgage officer asking about a gift letter I'd supposedly signed for Isla and Jesse's new condo. Mrs. March, thank you for coming in. We just need to verify this document. He slid a paper across his desk. It says you're gifting $40,000 toward their down payment. I'd never seen the document before. The signature at the bottom looked like mine, but I knew I'd never signed anything like this. The address listed was my old house from 5 years ago. I never signed this, I told him, and I never agreed to give them money for a house. His face went pale. This was submitted as part of their loan application. If it's not legitimate, it's not legitimate. I want you to email me a copy right now, and I want to file a fraud report. He printed 3 copies and sent the PDF to my email while I watched. Then he made a note in their loan file that the gift letter was disputed. Their closing is supposed to be next month, he said. Without this gift letter, they might not qualify for the loan amount they requested. I thanked him and drove straight home to call Mrs. Ortiz. The coffee shop smelled like espresso and warm pastries. Jesse sat across from me at a small table, his face red and defensive. I'd asked him to meet me to discuss the gift letter, but he'd come ready for a fight. Look, Susan, you need to understand something. He leaned forward, trying to look intimidating. People your age don't belong in the front row of modern weddings. It's about aesthetics. I pulled out my phone and opened the voice recording app. Say that again, Jesse. What? What you just said about people my age. Say it again. He looked confused but kept talking. Maura explained it to Isla. Older guests in the family photos make the whole wedding look dated. It's nothing personal. But it is personal when you forge my signature to pay for your lifestyle. I showed him the gift letter on my phone. Did you think I wouldn't find out about this? His face went white, then red again. That's not. Maura said you verbally agreed. I never agreed to anything. But you're right about one thing, Jesse. This is about aesthetics, and forging an old lady's signature is very ugly. He stood up fast, knocking his chair backward. You should be grateful we even considered including you. Maura knows how to handle people like you. I saved the recording and smiled at him. Thank you. That was very helpful. The church hall smelled like old wood and candle wax. I'd brought cupcakes for the volunteer florists who were decorating for the ceremony tomorrow. These women had been kind to me during the planning process. Mrs. Patterson, the head volunteer, pulled me aside while the others arranged flowers. Susan, I need to tell you something. Maura has been saying things about you to Ela. She showed me her phone. In their group chat, Maura had written, "The mother is going to embarrass the family by crying and making everything about her. We need to protect Isla from that drama." Another message read, "Susan is just the wallet anyway. Once the bills are paid, we don't need her around." Mrs. Patterson scrolled down further. "She's been poisoning your daughter against you for months, Susan. Ela used to talk about you all the time, but lately she acts like I'm a stranger," I finished. The other volunteers gathered around, nodding sadly. Mrs. Chen showed me more screenshots from their phones. Maura had built an entire narrative about me being unstable, attention-seeking, and financially irresponsible. "We saved everything," Mrs. Patterson said. "We knew something wasn't right." I hugged each of them and thanked them for their loyalty. At least someone had been paying attention to the truth. The rental warehouse smelled like metal and dust. I stood in the background while Maura signed for the new rental package. Without my original deposit, everything had been downgraded. The gold Chiavari chairs were gone, replaced by basic folding chairs. The upgraded linens were switched to standard white. The sound system was smaller. Even the dance floor was half the size. "The generator isn't included anymore either," the rental manager explained. "That was part of the premium package. You'll need to arrange separate power if the venue has any electrical issues." I watched Maura's face as she realized what this meant. The venue was old and had problems with the electrical system during events. Without the backup generator, one power outage would shut down everything. "How much to add the generator?" she asked. $3,000, due on delivery." Maura's credit card was declined twice before a third one went through. The rental manager printed the receipt and handed it to her with a sympathetic look. "Everything is COD'd now," he told her. "Payment required before we unload." I circled the letters COD in the air with my finger, making sure she saw me. Her face turned the color of her expensive lipstick. The church sanctuary was quiet except for footsteps on old wooden floors. Isla practiced walking down the aisle in her wedding dress, but she kept tripping over the hem. It was the same hem I'd paid to have professionally shortened 3 weeks ago. She kept her back to me during the entire rehearsal. When I tried to approach her for a hug, she stepped away like I was on fire. "Isla, honey, can we talk? Just don't ruin tomorrow, okay?" Her voice was sharp and small at the same time. "Maura says you're going to make a scene." "I'm not going to make a scene. I'm not even going to be there." She finally looked at me, and for a second I saw my little girl again, confused, hurt, scared. "Why are you doing this to me?" "I'm not doing anything to you. You uninvited me, remember?" "That was," Maura said it would be easier. "Easier for who?" She couldn't answer. The wedding coordinator clapped her hands and called for places. Isla turned away from me again, lifting her dress to avoid tripping. I whispered to her back, "You don't have to prove anything to anyone, sweetheart. You're enough, just as you are." She whispered back without turning around, "Just don't ruin it." I left through the side door. My back porch was peaceful in the evening air. Crickets chirped in the distance, while Mrs. Ortiz and I sat in rocking chairs, going over all the evidence I'd collected. She had her reading glasses on and was taking notes on a legal pad. Susan, you need to file a police report about that forged signature tonight. And you should put a fraud alert on your credit, tied to all these wedding vendors. Will that help? It creates an official record that someone has been using your identity without permission. When this all comes out tomorrow, you'll have documentation that you tried to protect yourself. She helped me fill out the online police report from my laptop. We uploaded photos of the forged documents, the fake gift letter, and Jesse's recorded confession about Maura handling people like me. The fraud alert took 20 minutes to set up, but it was worth it. Now, if anyone tried to use my name or credit for wedding expenses, the transactions would be flagged immediately. You're not destroying their wedding, Mrs. Ortiz said as we finished the paperwork. You're refusing to be used and abused by people who should love you. For the first time in weeks, I slept through the entire night without worrying about wedding details. My bedroom was still dark when my phone started buzzing with emails. The bank had sent confirmations. I was no longer the guarantor on the bridge loan, which meant it was now due in full immediately. The venue had marked the account as high risk with a note that said, alternate payer required. The wedding planner had sent 3 increasingly desperate messages begging me to reconsider. The florist wanted to know if she should deliver flowers without payment. The photographer was asking for his balance before he'd show up. I replied to each of them with the same message. I wish Isla and Jesse a beautiful wedding day. Then I turned off my phone and made coffee. Through my kitchen window, I could see Mrs. Ortiz watering her flowers in her bathrobe. She waved, and I waved back. It was Saturday morning. The wedding was at 4 o'clock. By tonight, everyone would know the truth about who had really been paying for everything. They would also know what happened when you bite the hand that feeds you. I pinned a sunflower to my jacket and sat down to read the newspaper, like it was any other day. Because for me, it was. I wasn't invited to the wedding, remember? The church bells were ringing when Mrs. Ortiz and I took our position across the street. I wore my sunflower pin and my most comfortable shoes. If I couldn't be inside, at least I could witness what I'd helped create. Through the open church doors, I could see the front row where my seat should have been. There was a gap there now, like a missing tooth. Maura sat in the front row on the groom's side, wearing a dress that probably cost more than most people's cars. A little girl in a flower girl dress ran up to us on the sidewalk. Are you the bride's grandma? How come you're out here instead of in there? Mrs. Ortiz squeezed my hand while I smiled at the child. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, sweetheart. The little girl skipped back to her parents, who were hurrying into the church. Cars were still arriving, guests streaming in wearing their best outfits. Everyone looked happy and excited. I wondered how long that would last. The ceremony music started, floating out through the stained glass windows. I could picture Isla walking down the aisle in her beautiful dress, trying not to trip on the hem that was still too long. How do you feel? Mrs. Ortiz asked me. Peaceful, I said, and I meant it. The hotel ballroom glittered with gold lights and white flowers. Mrs. Ortiz and I had moved to the hotel parking lot where we could see the reception through the large windows. Guests were mingling with cocktails, everyone dressed up and laughing. The DJ announced that dinner was ready, but something was wrong. I could see the catering manager blocking the kitchen door, shaking his head at someone. Maura was arguing with him, her face getting red as she gestured wildly. Other guests started to notice the delay. Waiters stood around looking confused. The bride and groom sat at the head table, but no food was coming out. Mrs. Ortiz pulled out her tiny binoculars. The caterer is showing them something on a tablet. Looks like a contract, I nodded. Without my deposits and my credit card as backup, everything was cash on delivery now. Maura had probably promised to pay after the cake cutting, but the caterer wasn't buying it. Guests were starting to check their phones and whisper to each other. You could feel the confusion spreading through the room like ripples on a pond. The catering manager walked away from Maura, leaving her standing by the kitchen door. Her confident smile was finally gone. Here we go, I whispered. A white truck pulled up to the hotel's service entrance. 2 men in work clothes got out and started walking toward the building. I recognized the logo on their shirts, It was the rental company that had provided the backup generator. Mrs. Ortiz checked her watch. 7:30. The contract probably said they could reclaim unpaid equipment after 6 hours. Through the ballroom windows, we watched the lights flicker once, then twice. The hotel's electrical system was acting up, just like it always did during big events. Without the backup generator, any power outage would shut down everything. The rental guys found the generator behind the building. I could see them checking their paperwork while Maura ran outside in her heels, waving her arms at them. One of the men held up his tablet, showing her the COD requirement. She pulled out her phone, probably trying to call her credit card company, but he shook his head. "Payment first," he said loudly enough for us to hear across the parking lot. The lights in the ballroom flickered again, longer this time. Guests started pulling out their phone flashlights. The DJ's music cut out for a few seconds before coming back. The rental men loaded the generator onto their truck and drove away, leaving Maura standing in the parking lot in her expensive dress. Inside, the lights went out completely. Emergency lighting kicked in, casting weird shadows through the ballroom windows. In the dim glow, I could see guests moving around with their phone lights, trying to figure out what was happening. Ayla appeared in the hotel's side entrance, clutching a stack of crumpled papers. Even from across the parking lot, I could see that her makeup had been crying. She looked around frantically until she spotted me. She ran across the street in her wedding dress, holding the papers high. "Mom, did you see these emails?" The papers were printouts of my rescission notices, the forged gift letter, and the transcript of Jesse's coffee shop confession. Someone had forwarded them to her during the chaos. "Did you really think I didn't love you?" Her voice cracked like a little girl's. I reached out and touched her face gently. "Love doesn't uninvite people, sweetheart. Love doesn't forge signatures. Love doesn't lie about who paid for what." She looked down at the papers in her hands, really reading them for the first time. "I didn't know about the signatures. I thought, Maura said you were trying to control everything. I was trying to love you. There's a difference." Behind us, car doors were slamming as wedding guests started to leave. The reception was falling apart in the dark, and people weren't waiting around. Ayla buried her face in my shoulder and sobbed. A man in a navy business suit walked into the dark ballroom, carrying a briefcase and looking official. Mrs. Ortiz nudged me with her elbow. "Bank representative." Through the windows, we watched him approach the head table where Jesse sat alone. Ayla was still outside with me, crying into my shoulder while her dress got wrinkled. The bank rep opened his briefcase and pulled out documents. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but I could see Jesse's face go white as he read. Other guests gathered around, trying to understand what was happening. Maura appeared and tried to insert herself into the conversation, but the bank rep held up a hand to stop her. He was explaining something about loan defaults and misrepresentation. Some of the words must have been loud enough for nearby guests to hear, because phones started coming out to record video. Jesse put his head in his hands. Maura finally dropped her fake smile and let her real face show through. Hard, calculating, and mean. The bank rep packed up his briefcase and walked out, leaving behind a table full of legal papers. Wedding guests were streaming toward the exits now, some of them talking excitedly about what they'd just witnessed. "The bridge loan came due when you were removed as guarantor," Mrs. Ortiz explained quietly. "Without your backing, they have to pay it back immediately." The community center smelled like coffee and fresh paint. Ayla and I sat across from each other at a small table, finally talking alone for the first time in months. She'd changed out of her wedding dress and into jeans and a sweater. "I traded you for a room full of strangers," she said quietly, "and most of them left anyway when the power went out." I slid a folder across the table to her. Inside were bank documents, police report numbers, and 2 papers she wasn't expecting. A trust fund I'd set up for any future grandchildren's education, and a scholarship I'd created in her father's memory for single-parent students. "This is where my real love goes," I told her. "Not into fancy parties or perfect photos. Into making sure the people I love have what they need to build good lives." She opened the trust documents with shaking hands. The amount made her gasp. "Mom, this is incredible. But why didn't you tell me?" Because love isn't supposed to be a transaction. I wasn't trying to buy your loyalty. I was trying to support your happiness. She started crying again, but quietly this time. What happens now? Now you decide what kind of person you want to be and what kind of relationships you want to have. What about Jesse? I looked at her carefully. What about him? She was quiet for a long time. He left right after the bank man came, didn't even say goodbye. My kitchen smells like cinnamon rolls and lemon tea. It's been a month since the wedding. That wasn't. And life has settled into a new rhythm. Ela has a job at the community center now, helping coordinate programs. We have counseling together every Wednesday. Jesse moved back in with his mother after their condo loan was denied. The venue settled with them for partial payment, but banned them from booking there again. Most wedding vendors wrote off their losses rather than deal with legal battles. Maura avoids the grocery stores where she might run into me. I heard she's telling people she was the victim of a vindictive ex-mother-in-law, but most people in town know the real story by now. I keep the photo of my trust fund papers on the refrigerator, right next to a picture of Ela and me at a baseball game last weekend. She looks happy in that photo, really happy, not the stressed fake smile she wore during wedding planning. My sunflower pin sits in a little dish by the kitchen window where morning light makes it sparkle. I didn't ruin a wedding by canceling my funding. I saved the rest of my life. And I discovered something important. Respect and love aren't the same thing. You can love someone who doesn't respect you, but you don't have to finance their disrespect. I'm 68 years old, and I finally learned how to say no. Best lesson I ever taught myself.